Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to do a book to movie comparison of Nomadland. The full title for the book is Nomadland: Surviving America in the 21st Century. It's a nonfiction book that's written by Jessica Bruder, and it takes a look into the lives of US nomads. If you want to be more specific, it's actually a piece of immersion journalism because Jessica spent 3 years on and off living amongst the nomads and participating in their community, doing the jobs that they do, interviewing them, and so on. The book discusses the circumstances that can lead someone to living a nomadic life. Generally, it seemed to be either because of the Great Recession, because of a messy, expensive divorce, or sometimes because of disability. The book talks about some of the positive sides of the community, which can be the freedom that comes from living in an RV, a van, a car, also the creativity of the lifestyle and how you have to adapt your vehicle to work for you, and then also just the community itself, whether meeting up in person for an event or the online community, which is also very popular. On the flip side, it also discusses some of the harder parts of the lifestyle. If you're living in a more populated area, it could be the cops or harassment from non-nomads. And it could also be things like healthcare. How do you deal with healthcare? The lack of a real address, which can be very challenging sometimes. Also, the tough physical temporary jobs that nomads do in order to accommodate their lifestyle, and often because they have lost their jobs for one reason or another. I also want to mention that this book had a small discussion about why the majority of nomads are white, which I thought was an important conversation to have, but I wish it had dug a little bit deeper. That section had been a little bit longer, but it is important to note because the community is so important with this lifestyle. Some other things that I wanted to note about the book is that there is one nomad named Linda May who's definitely focused on the most. It seemed like the author had the closest relationship with her. Maybe Linda May was the most willing to sort of keep up and chat with her about what was going on in her life. So there was the most life details about her. There were plenty of other nomads that were mentioned, but it was more of like a here or there passing thing, whereas Linda May, we really got to know a lot about her life and the people in it, her family, and then also her dreams and her aspirations for kind of where she wanted to go from here. That relationship also caused the weakest part of the book, in my opinion. There was this whole section where Linda May is always talking about how she wants to build an earth ship, which is a type of home in the desert that's self-sustaining, and she's been looking for the right piece of land for a long time. And at one point, the author actually goes to the land that Linda May has bought. Linda May's never seen it before. She's only just looked at it through like a Google Map view kind of thing. So Jessica actually goes there and calls Linda May and then like gives her a tour around through video chat of what her land looks like. And it was like an Arizona play-by-play of walking across that land and everything. And I just thought that was so unnecessary. I thought it kind of took away from the book. It's one thing to share the aspirations of these people, but to get that specific with something, that was a little bit too much. I settled on a 3.5 out of 5 for the book. I did find it a bit repetitive at times, and there were some not so interesting sections like the Arizona play-by-play, but I also found it to give really great insight into the lives of nomads and gave us a good glimpse into that culture and that lifestyle and sort of the different people that make it up. Now, what I find interesting is how do you take a book like this that's nonfiction, that doesn't focus on one person throughout and really just talks about a lifestyle and what that lifestyle is like and the people within it? How do you take that and make it into a film? The film is written, directed, and edited by Chloe Zhao. She also produced it with a few other people, and it follows a fictional woman named Fern, who is played by Frances McDormand, and they take real elements of the lives of nomads and apply it to Fern's story. So at the beginning of the movie, Fern now has to leave Empire, Nevada, which is a town or a city that was created in relation to US Gypsum. So all the people that worked there lived in this community together, and US Gypsum has shut down, so the community is shutting down, and Fern now has to leave this life that she has known for so many years, and she decides to live in a van that she has, and that's kind of leads her to that nomadic lifestyle. The movie shows Fern working those tough physical jobs that I mentioned that nomads have to work, so working in an Amazon warehouse before Christmas, camp hosting in the summer, doing the sugar beet harvest in the fall. It also shows her attending the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, which is a yearly massive gathering of nomads out in the Southwest. Before things get really hot, they all gather there and they share tips and tricks for living that lifestyle. What was really interesting about the movie is that it actually has real nomads who are talked about in the book playing themselves, or at least a version of themselves, in the film. Linda May, who's talked about a lot in the book, actually appears a bunch in the first half of the film, and some of her lines are actual stories that were told to Jessica in the book, and she's sort of retelling them to Fern, to Frances McDormand's character. I think this makes for a really unique mix of documentary style and fictional storytelling. It really blends the two together, and if you haven't read the book, you wouldn't really know how much those lines are blurred. One of the nice things about the movie was that it was able to cut out some of those weaker parts that I didn't like as much, because it was focusing on Fern and we followed her story. We didn't have any of the stuff with like Linda May and looking at her property. The Earthship was mentioned, but it's certainly not a focus. We are following Fern's story, so she's in every scene. You always see things kind of from her point of view and what she would be experiencing. I do think that the movie does gloss over some of the more complicated aspects of the nomadic lifestyle. You certainly see some not so great stuff, but they don't really talk about like what do you do with healthcare when you just have these temporary jobs and you don't have a lot of money. The complications with not having an address, and just also the general whiteness of nomads, that also really wasn't touched on either. There is one scene with I think the only other actual actor who's playing a fictional character actually has to go to the hospital and get surgery, and there's just no mention of the cost of that, the healthcare aspect, even though money is always a big thing for these people. So I felt like you could have gone a little bit deeper there because it related to Fern's story, but I understand that you can't always tackle everything just because you have to make a cohesive story that, you know, only takes up so much time. I also gave the film a 3.5 out of 5. It is a snapshot sort of story. There's no real distinct plot. There's no 3 acts building up to this big finale. It's just Fern living the life of a nomad. This sort of thing could have easily been made into a documentary, but I do think it's cool that Zhao decided to take this route instead. The film really takes that nomad story and adds an artistic lens to it. It's nothing flashy, it's very understated, it has beautiful cinematography. If you love gorgeous shots of the American Southwest, you are going to appreciate that aspect of this film. At the core of each medium, book and movie, they do tell us about mostly the same things. They just go about doing it in a different way. I don't think you can truly compare the two because it's not an exact adaptation, but it does seem like the film is very true to life based on what I read in the book. If you have read the book or watched the film or done both, let me know what you thought of them down below. I really think it was an interesting way to kind of take what is a nonfiction book and weave it into a fictional story with those nonfiction elements. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.